One of the decisions taken at a recent, i.e. last weekend, cabinet meeting of the Western Cape Cabinet was to again write to President Ramaphosa and the National Minister of Finance about the serious concerns that the WCG, which stands for Western Cape Government, has repeatedly raised in correspondence to the Presidency over the WCG's concerns about its fiscal sustainability. To decode all of that for us, the Premier Alan Winde. Hello, Alan.
Good afternoon, John.
Let's just take a couple of steps back and tell the listeners how the decisions are taken and who takes the decisions about how much of Treasury's money goes to the 9 provinces and to the 9,432 million municipalities.
So the province gets its money from National Treasury through a division of revenue formula. We get direct funding and we also get specifically earmarked funding. But at the end of the day, that makes up our budget in the province, 82 billion rand. Primarily health and education have the lion's share of that budget. And it gets, the census plays a role. And then other data points, yes, the census plays a role. In our province, the last time that the census corrected the percentage of the formula was when the 2011 census then fed through to the 2013-14 financial year. In that change in the census, we got an extra 0.5%, which took our percentage of the total tax formula from 9.5% up to 10%. So in general, you can sort of say that the Western Cape's percentage of the overall budget, we get about 10%. But we all know that our population has been growing exponentially. We're the fastest growing province in South Africa. We can feel it not only at health and education, but I mean, you can see it. It's just we are under huge pressure, and it's those two departments that are feeling it most. But then we also saw last year, and you'll remember, we also declared a dispute because we had a 1.1 billion rand cut in year. That was post the wage negotiations that get centrally negotiated, and they were negotiated above the budget and above the inflation rate number that we put in. And so then we said, well, if you're going to put a wage hike in above what we get, then you need to fund it. And we didn't get the full funding for education and health. At the end of the day, we probably ended up at 74% of that cost coming through to us. So we have to carry the extra burden. And then, of course, you add the numbers to it, it really makes it untenable for us. And then on top of it, we've got further cuts, another 7 billion over the next 3 years. And so that means that we've got to put up an almighty fight to get a fairer share of the pie.
Is it the equation that's wrong, or is it a case of junk in, junk out because of what is fed into the equation in terms of the number of people and therefore the number of services and therefore the cost of providing those services? Because that's junk. The allocation that comes out at the end of it is equally junk.
Okay, so first of all, I mean, we have declared a dispute on the census numbers. They did not, in our opinion, have a correct reflection. But the census numbers are still showing a marked increase in the province. And so, while we're fighting about, whether the number was correct or not, we at least need to have or use that as a basis or use other info. We're also saying you don't have to only use that information. In health and education, we've got very accurate data points. We've got, the number of learners in schools. We can see how they've grown over time. We've got patient numbers in our hospitals. And so we can use other data points and feed those data points in to say, this should definitely give us a reflection of an increase. And then we can decide on the quantum. But to not be given the increase, to actually be given a cut, is totally unfair.
Okay.
You would have seen we've already had to advise through education that there's going to be a cut in teacher posts. Last year we were cutting 945 health posts. We've got to run a responsible government based on the budget allocations that we get and the indications that we're getting. So that really is making it untenable when we're aligning our positions, our health posts and our education posts to the indicative numbers for next year. But then at the same time, everybody knows that the queues for hospitals are getting longer, and of course the number of learners arriving in our education system.
To what extent is this a Western Cape specific issue? It might be a Western Cape worse issue, but you have the sense that even though the Western Cape in many respects is administratively more efficient than other provinces, that in those other provinces there isn't budget to provide the services that provinces are supposed to provide. So is this simply a case of there's not enough money to divide up in the first place, and because the population inflow into the Western Cape isn't being recognised as it should be recognised, that it's worse for the Western Cape than the other 8 provinces?
So it is worse for us because we're the fastest growing province, but it has huge implications for Gauteng and KZN as well, because the 3 provinces, the 3 biggest provinces are Western Cape, Gauteng and KZN. And we are the 3 provinces that are growing the fastest. Minister Mania did raise the budgeting issue at the education ministers meeting, the KEM meeting on Friday. And he said, you could definitely hear the discussion coming from specifically the other big provinces, that they're facing very, very similar positions because, of course, we're all being cut across the board. And the hard decision now is to say, well, in actual fact, those provinces who have less learners in the system or who have less health patients in the system, they're going to have a decrease in budget. And politically, that's a very difficult decision to make. But you have to make hard decisions so that the provinces with the growth can get the commensurate or the correct. And that's what we're saying. We only want our fair allocation of funding, nothing more and nothing less.
Thank you very much for that explanation, Premier Alan Winde.